What is up, guys? Rick Kakis here. Thank you so much for stopping by. And yesterday, after 20 raid runs, actually that's not true, it was more than 20, it was 20 looted runs, I finally got my Tarrabah Exotic SMG from the Crown of Sorrows raid. So, obviously, I'm pretty late to the party, so I'm not going to spend this video reviewing this weapon too much. Really, I'm going to talk about that process. Doing a raid 3 times a week, every single week. What are some tips and strategies that have made farming that raid a lot easier? Is it worth going after this exotic SMG if it's going to take you that long? And is this the way things should be to get raid exotics? Well, let's get started. So, let's talk about Crown of Sorrows. As you can imagine, again, I've done it quite a few times. It's a raid that I do enjoy. I think the first portion of it is way too long, but regardless, some things have definitely changed and somewhat improved the process of farming this raid in the second to last and last encounter. Now, for Galran's Shadow, the second to last encounter, you really have the introduction of the Anarchy, which is the exotic raid grenade launcher from the Scourge of the Past raid that has made things a lot easier. Now, how it does that is because previously you had one person without the buff, one person with the buff, melee, Galran's Deception, and his shield went down, DPS goes back up, same thing. But this resulted in a bunch of people needing to have the buff and just standing around because you can't damage him when you have the buff. Well, it turns out because the Anarchy, its projectiles just shoot out electricity on the ground, you can have someone with the buff using the Anarchy and just constantly shoot him, constantly electrocute him. He's always going to be damaged by that buff, and then any of the other 5 people that don't need buff can run up and melee him to take his shield down. It lets all 5 people DPS him for all 5 of the shield breaks, and it makes things a lot easier. Moving on from there, for the final encounter, Galran, firstly, something we adopted is going in teams of 2, each team covering their third of the map. This strategy makes it pretty easy to spawn kill the ads, and importantly, the massive Galrans that are going to shoot fireballs at you, they actually can't hit you. They won't even bother to shoot you if you're right up next to them. So, that's great, but for newer teams, I kind of would still recommend the middle well approach I went over in my raid guide, simply because it's a lot easier to learn when you're compartmentalizing things. Like, you only have to worry about the crystals, that's your job. If you are throwing new players into the ringer against crystals and the boss and the ads and learning when to switch, it's a lot at once. It kind of can be easier to do that middle approach and say, hey, you guys stay here, we're gonna go get crystals and stuff like that. But regardless, either approach now is an option, and also importantly, of course, just what weapons to utilize when DPS in Galran has really come to light and the Swarm of the Raven has stood on top. Importantly, it's just a legendary launcher, so you can use it alongside something like the Outbreak Perfected. Absolutely go to town with the Swarm of the Raven, do amazing amounts of damage, and of course that's combined with the introduction of one person pretty much always running tractor cannon, because you can actually hit Galran with it, and then once you're out of ammo you can switch to your Outbreak Perfected, get that consistency, and still get a crap ton of damage. So those are the things that kind of changed to make the raid farming easier. Alright, now what about the weapon itself? How is the Tarrabah? Well, looking at its perks, firstly, intrinsically, we have Ravenous Beast. This weapon stores power when dealing or receiving damage. Once full, hold reload to unleash the beast. This is combined with Bottomless Appetite. Dealing continuous damage extends the duration of Ravenous Beast. So essentially it works like this. You kill multiple enemies, or you damage a big enemy for quite a while, or you take damage and you're eventually going to fill up essentially the bar on this gun. You're going to see it start to glow more and more and more, and then you're going to have an indication on the bottom left of your screen saying Ravenous Beast is ready. You hold reload, you reload your gun, the whole thing becomes glowing, and it does quite a bit more damage. And when you're in that state, you can damage other enemies and it's going to extend its duration. So you can go to town and wipe out a ton of ads. And that's because the damage bonus is pretty significant. You're normally going to be doing 8,386 damage for a precision shot on a red bar. When you're in Ravenous Beast mode, you're going to be doing 16,780, and that is pretty much exactly double the damage. So you get 7 whole seconds of double damage, and you can extend it past 7 seconds for dealing damage. That's pretty darn decent. Also, another good factor is that it activates when you want it to activate. Think about kill clip. It'll still activate if you kill like the last enemy and you just reload automatically and aw dang, your kill clip is wasted. But with this, you can save it and activate it when you want. You can have it glowing and run around and kill enemies still with it glowing, no big deal. And then when you see a bunch of yellow bars or a ton of enemies, then you activate it and get that damage bonus. And that versatility is great, however, this weapon also has some pretty significant downsides. First and foremost, it actually takes quite a while to ramp up this gun. To make it fully glowing before you can enter Ravenous Beast mode, you are going to have to kill multiple enemies. Like we're talking 5 to 6 red bar enemies killed before you can even activate it. Whereas with something like Kill Clip, it activates after a single enemy if you want it to, and Rampage, it's activating every single time you're killing one of those red bars. So that is a downside. Another downside, and this is probably the most annoying one, and honestly I really hope Bungie fixes this in the future, is that it goes away if you switch weapons. So the versatility of being able to activate it when you want goes down dramatically when you can't, for example, have it ready to go, switch to a shotgun and kill a certain really powerful enemy or do something, switch to a heavy DPS something, and then switch back to this weapon and then activate its mega perk. Instead, it'll just be gone and you have to start all over again building up the buff. That is a huge downside. And then to kind of top it all off, any real play that this may have seen kind of goes out the window because it's really just a worse recluse, and that's a legendary, so it doesn't take up your exotic slot, and again, it's better in a lot of scenarios. So that kind of leads into the question, okay, is this worth getting? And I think you guys can probably guess the answer. It's really not, especially if it's going to take you 20 plus tries to do it. It took me 20. It could take you 100. Like, it's pure, unadulterated RNG on top of RNG. But of course, you never do know. This could be the recipient of a buff, and then suddenly it's extremely desirable. Also, a lot of people just like having all the exotics in the game. It's a great thing to collect. So a lot of people are still going to be doing COS trying to get this gun. But is this entire process of just farming and hoping really the way to go? We didn't always have this even in Destiny 2. If you can remember, back with Leviathan and its exotic weapon, the Legend of Acreus shotgun, that had an exotic quest to go out and get. But that's not the only time that happened. The original Outbreak Prime from Destiny 1, that was an exotic quest. The Touch of Malice from King's Fall, exotic quest. Those weapons, you didn't necessarily have to rely on pure RNG. Again, for the Legend of Acreus, you could go out and get it. For the Outbreak Prime, you could go out and specifically get it. You were guaranteed these exotic raid weapons for those scenarios. It wasn't just RNG, and that's an interesting thing. Because Bungie is clearly waffling between these two different things. Should we have guaranteed exotic quest raid weapons, or should we have just pure RNG raid weapons? And personally, I kind of prefer the exotic quest weapons, where you do have guaranteed drops. Now, of course, the downside of that is, okay, once you get this exotic, what's your motivation to keep doing the raid? Because I've done the raid 3 times a week, every single week. I don't think I'm going to do it 3 times next week. My only reward really is slightly better armor with enhanced perks. I actually have all the curated rolls for the different weapons dropping and some other good rolls for them as well. I don't need any more raid loot. So that does demonstrate the downside of these exotic quests. If I would have got the Tarrabah quite a bit earlier, I may have stopped playing the raid quite a bit earlier. Whereas, as it is right now, because RNG has kind of screwed me over, it's definitely kept me playing this content. That's undeniable. But you still want the people playing your game and doing that content to be having some degree of fun at least. And while for me, it's relatively easy to throw together a solid raid team. For a lot of you guys out there, that's not the case. And looking at 20 plus raid completions before you get an exotic is a little much. In my opinion, the middle ground here is what Bungie often does. And this is somewhat annoying because when Bungie gets hounded for bad RNG, they'll fix it. And many times before, both in Destiny 2, recently with Reckoning, and in Destiny 1, they introduced the fact that if you don't get a certain piece of weapon, like if you don't get the Tarrabah for a run, the chance to get it increases. And the next run, if you don't get it, it increases more. And it just keeps increasing and increasing until eventually you get the gun. Well, if that's a good approach, and Bungie keeps implementing that for poor RNG systems, why not just implement that off the start? And if it is already implemented, it's implemented so insignificantly that you can't really notice it. Because I am in no means the last person of my raid group to get this weapon. Most people don't have it still. And again, we've all been doing it 20 times. For them, it could be 30, 40, 50. This system is just... it definitely leaves a lot to be desired. So I would prefer the system I just mentioned where RNG gets better and better and better, or start doing some exotic quests again with raid weapons. At least split the difference. Maybe have one RNG, the next one quest, the next one RNG, the next one quest. Because right now we have 3 lotteries in a row, and that's not exactly the best approach. Guys, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed, found this interesting. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCactus. That's linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.